For 12,000 years, the Vath Galactic Empire had been the undisputed king of the cosmos. They held 1,000 star systems in an iron fist, backed by tens of thousands of warships. Whatever they said, went. Their authority was total. But after that long at the top, you start to get arrogant. On the bridge of his cruiser, the Iron Dominion, Commander Kethaval was monumentally bored. In 60 years of service, he'd fought in 3 border wars and seen it all. Nothing impressed him anymore. Putting down rebellions was as routine as brushing his teeth. The universe had one simple rule: the strong make the rules, and the weak follow them. It was as fundamental as gravity. His patrol of 12 warships was on babysitting duty near the Keldon Nebula, a useless swirl of gas and dead stars. It was the cosmic equivalent of a cul-de-sac. "Commander," his sensor tech's voice sliced through the boredom, "we're picking up an unknown vessel entering our sector." Kethaval finally stirred, a spark of interest in his eyes. "Unknown? Tell me more." "Its design doesn't match anything in our databases, sir. It's moving at a steady pace, right through the nebula." Kethaval's brow furrowed. Every species that could cobble together a spaceship had been cataloged, studied, and usually conquered by the Vath. An unknown ship just shouldn't exist. "Show me," he commanded. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a ship that was completely alien. It was big, maybe half the size of his cruiser, with a plain, dark gray hull. The design was purely practical, with no fancy details or markings, except for one tiny symbol on its side, a little circle of blue and green. "Where'd it come from?" Kethaval demanded. The sensor officer tapped at his console. "Tracking its path now, Commander. Looks like it came from—" He trailed off, his face twisting in confusion. "The Sol system." A loud, obnoxious laugh rang out across the bridge. It was Lieutenant Vorsoon, the young and cocky weapons officer. "The Sol system?" Vorsoon sneered. "You mean where the humans live? Aren't those the primitives who are still trying to figure out how to get to their own moon?" Kethaval had a faint memory of the file. An Imperial survey team had stumbled upon their little world about 40 years ago, documenting a species that was messing around with chemical rockets. They were slapped with a Tier 7 threat rating, the absolute lowest possible. They were so insignificant, it wasn't even worth the fuel to conquer them. The survey team had a good laugh at their old radio broadcasts before moving on. Humans were a joke, a forgotten footnote in the Imperial archives. "Well, look at that. The little guy's finally built a real ship," Kethaval said with a smirk. "How cute. Alert the fleet. We're going to intercept this toy and teach its crew why you don't wander into the deep end of the pool." The 12 Vath warships changed course, moving like a pack of wolves that just found a lost lamb. But the human ship didn't react at all. It didn't speed up, slow down, or try to run. It just kept gliding forward, as if 12 massive warships converging on its position were just a minor traffic jam. "They probably haven't even seen us," Vorsoon scoffed. "I'll bet their sensors are as primitive as they are." "Open a hailing frequency," Kethaval ordered. "Let's give them a proper welcome." The comms officer complied. "Channels open, Commander." Kethaval stepped forward, his voice dripping with authority. "Attention, unidentified vessel. This is Commander Kethaval of the Vath Imperial Navy. You have trespassed in our sovereign space. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. If you resist, we will turn you into stardust. You have 30 seconds to obey." He waited. The bridge was perfectly still, every officer glued to the screen. 30 seconds ticked by. The human ship just kept coming, completely ignoring him. "Maybe they don't understand us," the comms officer suggested. "Their translation software is probably garbage." "Then let's use the one language everyone in the galaxy understands," Vorsoon said, practically bouncing with eagerness. "Commander, request permission to fire a warning shot." Kethaval thought about it. The ship was no threat, but ignoring a Vath commander was an insult. "Permission granted," he said. "Fire one plasma burst across their bow." A hungry grin spread across Vorsoon's face. A blinding bolt of plasma ripped through the darkness, streaking so close to the human ship it should have made their teeth rattle. Any normal crew would have surrendered right then. The human ship didn't even flinch. It just kept on its path, as steady as a planet in its orbit. They're either the bravest creatures in the galaxy, or the dumbest, Kethaval muttered to himself. Bring us in closer. I want a full scan of that ship, inside and out. The Iron Dominion surged forward, its escorts fanning out to box in the intruder. The sensor officer powered up the deep scan system, a piece of tech so advanced it could virtually peel the armor off any known ship. Scanning now, Commander, the officer reported. Then he hesitated. Wait a minute. These readings, they can't be right. What is it? The hull. Our scanners are bouncing off. It's like they can't get through. The officer pushed the scanner's power to 100%. The console groaned in protest. For a few heart-pounding seconds, nothing. Then, a trickle of data started coming in. The officer's face went pale. His smug confidence evaporated, replaced by a tremor in his hands. Commander, he said, his voice barely a whisper. You need to see this for yourself. Kethaval walked over to the console. At first glance, the data looked like complete nonsense. He assumed it was a system error, but every diagnostic check came back clean. The information was real. The human ship's hull was forged from a material unknown to the Vath Empire. It was impossibly dense, and its energy signature was unlike anything they had ever recorded. And deep inside the ship, where the engine should be, the sensors detected a power source that was generating more energy than his entire 12-ship fleet combined. That's impossible, Kethaval breathed. Humans are cavemen. They can't have technology like this. Commander, the comms officer cut in, we're getting a transmission from the human ship. Kethaval's throat suddenly felt dry. On screen. A woman's face appeared. She had dark hair and calm, sharp eyes. She was wearing a simple uniform with that same blue and green circle on her shoulder. She looked right into the camera, right at him, and there wasn't a trace of fear in her expression. Commander Kethaval, she said. Her accent in his language was perfect. My name is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Navy vessel Quiet Dawn. We're sorry for the slow reply. We wanted to give your scanners enough time to finish their work. Kethaval could only stare, his brain trying to catch up. She knew his name. She knew their language. She let them scan her. You're in our space without permission, he finally choked out, the words sounding pathetic even to his own ears. You're breaking galactic law. Captain Chen offered a small, knowing smile. Oh, we know all about your laws, Commander. We've been watching you for a very long time. We're not here to start a fight. We're here to deliver a message. What message? It's for your Emperor and his High Council. We are on our way to your capital, and we'd much rather this trip be a peaceful one. Vorsoon stormed forward, his face turning a furious shade of red. You threaten us? One little ship against 12 will blow you to atoms. Captain Chen's eyes shifted to him, and her expression was almost one of pity. Lieutenant, I really wouldn't recommend doing that. Her voice remained perfectly calm. We have no wish to hurt you, but we will absolutely defend ourselves. Fire everything! Vorsoon shrieked, slamming his fist on the weapons console. Turn them to dust! Stand down! Kethaval roared, but it was too late. Vorsoon had already hit the master fire control. Plasma cannons erupted. A storm of missiles shot from their tubes. Lances of pure energy sliced through space. 12 warships unleashed their full, terrifying power on the single human ship. And then, in less time than it takes to blink, the human ship moved. Kethaval had never seen anything move so fast. 1 second it was there, the next it was just gone. The fleet's entire volley of weapons hit nothing but empty space, and then every light on the Iron Dominion's bridge went out. The engines went silent, the weapon systems died, every single piece of equipment on the ship just shut down. Red emergency lights flickered to life, bathing the bridge in an eerie glow. Kethaval saw his crew, frozen at their stations in stunned silence. "Report!" he yelled into the dark. "What in the stars just happened?" His sensor officer stared at his blank console, his hands shaking violently. All ships are dead in the water, Commander. All 12 of them. We've been completely neutralized. How? What did they shoot us with? I don't know, sir. There was no blast, no impact, not even an energy wave. They just switched us off. On the main screen, which had sputtered back on, the human ship reappeared, floating peacefully as if nothing had happened. Captain Chen's face filled the view screen once more. Commander Kethaval, she said, her voice as gentle as a whisper. What if you were the top dog on the Galactic playground, only to have your power snatched away in the blink of an eye? Imagine your entire fleet, your legacy, floating dead in space without a single shot being fired. That's the nightmare Commander Keithel was living, and the lesson he was about to learn was about to turn the entire galaxy upside down. You're going to want to stick around to see how a species everyone dismissed as nobodies managed to humble the biggest bullies in the universe. A voice filled his command bridge. Your systems will be back online in about 2 hours. Your crews are unharmed. Your ships are untouched. Please inform your leaders that humanity wishes to talk. We will be waiting for you at the border. And just like that, the message cut off. The human ship turned and simply faded into the black, moving like a great white shark that's never known a predator. Keithel just stared, his hands ice cold, his heart pounding against his ribs. In 60 years of decorated service, he had never felt terror like this. Get a message to Imperial Command, he choked out. Tell them what happened. Tell them everything. Tell them the humans are coming. His colossal warship, the Iron Dominion, just drifted there, powerless and silent, beneath the cold gaze of a billion stars. Out in the void, humanity was ready, and the Vorath Empire was in for a rude awakening. Admiral Vathkor had served the Empire for more than a century. He'd led fleets in 6 major wars and had personally forced 32 worlds to their knees. He was a living legend who had never once tasted defeat. His name alone was a threat whispered across star systems. But today, standing in the grand hall of Imperial Command, he felt a strange, long-forgotten feeling creeping in. Doubt. The message from Commander Kethal had come in 3 hours ago, a frantic, garbled distress call on emergency channels, because the entire patrol fleet's communications grid had simply vanished. The news tore through the military's top brass like a plasma bolt. Now, the most celebrated officers in the Imperial Navy stood in a thick, stunned silence, desperate for answers that nobody had. "Play the recording again," Admiral Vathkor ordered. A hologram flickered to life, showing the sensor logs from the Iron Dominion. You could see the strange human ship, the readouts that seemed to defy the laws of physics, and the exact moment 12 of the Vorath's best warships were turned into floating coffins without a single scorch mark on their hulls. The officers watched, their faces grim masks of dread. For some, it was their 5th time seeing it. The horror never faded. "It has to be a system glitch," grumbled General Thrus, commander of the 3rd Fleet. "Sensor ghosts, a massive equipment failure. That border patrol is flying clunkers held together with rust and hope." "The equipment checked out," Vathkor shot back, his tone sharp as glass. 3 separate diagnostic teams confirmed the data. What we saw was real. "Then explain it," Thrus roared. "Humans are primitives. They were a Tier 7 species just 40 years ago, barely figuring out atomic power. They were still launching chemical rockets. It's physically impossible for them to have developed this kind of tech in 4 decades. And yet, a calm voice cut through the tension from the other side of the room. The evidence suggests they did. Every single head in the room turned. High Minister Zelton emerged from the shadows. He was ancient, even for a Vorath, and had been the head of Imperial intelligence since before most of the officers present had been spawned. His expression was a placid mask, but his eyes held a deep worry that made Vathkor's stomach clench. "What are you not telling us, Minister?" Vathkor asked. Zelton glided over to the hologram and tapped a control. The image changed, replaced by a brilliant blue planet circling a single lonely moon. 40 years ago, he started, our deep space survey team entered their system. They watched humanity for 3 days, scanning their cities and their laughably crude spacecraft. They studied their broadcasts and their tech, The final report concluded that humans were thousands of years behind us. They were insignificant, completely harmless. He hit another button, and the view zoomed out to show their entire solar system. As per standard protocol for uninteresting new races, the team left a single spy drone behind. It was set to observe and transmit a status update every 5 years. "I've read those reports," Thrus grunted. "A whole lot of nothing. The humans were still playing in the mud, building a few more space stations, sending tiny probes to their gas giants. Nothing important." "Precisely," Zelton said smoothly. "That is what the reports led us to believe. But 3 days ago, we finally sent a ship to retrieve the drone itself. It had gone silent 2 years ago. We figured it had just broken down. We sent a recovery vessel to pick up the pieces." He paused, and the massive hall became so quiet you could hear the low hum of the air recyclers. The drone was in perfect condition. Its transmitter had been intentionally disabled. Someone had found it, taken it apart, and switched it off, but they made a single mistake. They left its recording systems running. The hologram shifted again, showing a scene that caused every decorated officer in the room to gasp. Earth and its moon were still there. But stretching between them was an incredible network of shipyards. Hundreds of them, massive glowing structures, each one making the largest Vorath construction facility look like a child's toy. And docked inside those shipyards, thousands of warships were being built at a rate that was simply impossible. The recording played on, showing huge fleets launching and gathering in the dark space behind the moon, hidden where no one would think to look. They were just waiting there, silent and motionless, like a pride of lions gathering before the hunt. "The humans found our drone 23 years ago," Zelton said, his voice barely a whisper. "They didn't destroy it. They didn't send out a warning. They dissected it, piece by piece. They learned our language from its memory banks. They learned our technology from its blueprints. They learned our fleet tactics from its archives. They turned our own intelligence into a weapon to be used against us." "It gets worse," Vathkor breathed. "That material on their ship's hull, our labs analyzed the sensor data. It's based on a composite we gave up on 6,000 years ago because we couldn't get it stable. The humans must have found our failed research in the drone's files and figured out how to make it work." General Thrus looked sick, his face pale. "How many?" he croaked. "How many ships have they made?" "Based on this footage, our analysts estimate humanity has built a minimum of 8,000 warships in the last 40 years. Every last one of them is a match for our capital ships, and many look to be far more advanced." 8,000? Thrus's voice cracked. "The entire Imperial Navy only has 12,000 ships. And half of those are support craft and freighters," Vathkor added grimly. "Our actual combat fleet is only about 5,000 strong." "Indeed," Zelton confirmed. "And the humans know that too. They've been watching our fleet movements. They've mapped our territories. They know exactly where our ships are, and precisely how long it would take us to organize any kind of defense." Admiral Vathkor felt as if the floor had just dropped out from under him. His entire worldview, the simple rule that the strong rule the weak, was a lie. Humanity was supposed to be weak. They weren't weak anymore. "But why?" he asked, his voice raw with disbelief. "Why build all this in secret?" "Because they remembered our visit," Zelton answered. "They remembered our survey team looking down on them with disgust, writing them off as irrelevant. They remembered us laughing at their little rockets and leaving their planet without even a simple hello. They made a collective choice, at that very moment, that no one in the galaxy would ever look down on them that way again." Just then, a communications officer sprinted into the hall, his face as white as a ghost. "Admiral, we have an incoming message from the human ship at the border." "On the main screen now," Vathkor ordered. The hologram changed one last time, and a human face appeared, the same woman from the patrol fleet's recording. "Greetings," she said, her expression perfectly calm, giving nothing away. "My name is Ambassador Sarah Chen, and I represent the United Earth Confederacy. I speak for all of humanity." "Ambassador?" Vathkor's mind was spinning. She had called herself a captain earlier. The military rank was just a disguise. This wasn't the opening move of an invasion. It was a formal introduction. "We realize our sudden appearance may have caused some concern," Chen continued. "That was not what we intended. We are not here to make threats or demands. We are here to talk." "Talk about what?" Vathkor snapped back. "About the future," she said simply. "About the chance for peace, about a potential alliance between our two peoples." She paused for a moment. "And about something else. A threat is coming that will endanger us both, but that is a discussion for your emperor and your high council, not for an open military channel. We'll be waiting for your answer at the border." And just like that, the screen went black. The officers stood frozen, their minds struggling to catch up. General Thrus was the first to snap out of it. "It has to be a trick. They're trying to get us to lower our guard before they hit us with everything they've got." "And what would be the point of that?" Zelton asked, his voice a calm anchor in the rising storm. "They're already holding all the winning cards. If they wanted a war, they wouldn't need to play games. They could have just rolled right over us." "Then what is it they want?" Thrus screamed. "Maybe," Zelton offered, "they want exactly what she said they want, to talk." Admiral Vathkor just stared at the empty space where Sarah Chen's face had been. He hadn't seen a trace of arrogance, not a hint of malice. All he saw was a quiet, unshakable strength, and that was more terrifying than any weapon he'd ever faced. "We have to tell the Emperor," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "This is way beyond our authority." He spun around and headed for the grand doors, the other officers trailing behind him like lost little kids. On the hologram they left behind, the image of Earth's colossal, silent shipyard still hung in the air. Thousands upon thousands of warships waiting in the darkness, built by a people the Empire had written off as nothing more than primitives. Vathkor had spent his whole life believing that real power came from the barrel of a plasma cannon. But as he walked through the sacred halls of Imperial Command, he began to wonder if he'd been wrong about everything. These humans had built a power that dwarfed his wildest nightmares, and the very first thing they did with it was ask to have a conversation. A single question was about to bring a galactic empire to its knees. It was the same question echoing in Emperor Vorath Thurto's mind as he strode into his council chambers. What kind of species builds a fleet that can wipe out entire star systems and then asks to talk? A small voice deep inside him whispered that these humans knew something his people didn't, a secret that could change the very fabric of existence. And the answer to that question is going to change everything, so you are definitely going to want to stick around for this. As the massive doors rumbled shut behind him, the chamber went dead silent, and light years away, humanity waited with a chilling patience for the Empire's reply. The Imperial Council hadn't seen this kind of chaos in 3,000 years. The most powerful people in the entire Vorath Empire were screaming at each other like fishmongers in a packed market. Pure, unfiltered fear had ripped their usual dignity to shreds. Blind panic had taken the place of their famous composure. Their entire galaxy was dangling over the edge of a cliff, and not a single one of them had a clue how to stop it from falling. Emperor Vorath Thurto watched the complete meltdown from his throne. He was ancient. His scales had faded to a pale, dusty gray, but his mind was as sharp as it had ever been. In his 200 years as emperor, he'd seen it all: savage wars, devastating plagues, bloody rebellions. He had always, every single time, found a way to protect his empire. But this was something new. This was a type of terror he didn't even have a name for. "We have to strike now," roared Grand Marshal Thrawn, smashing his fist on the great table. "Every second we waste, the humans get stronger. We need to gather the entire fleet and crush them before they get any closer." "And what fleet are you talking about?" Admiral Bethor shot back. "We have maybe 5,000 ships that are actually ready for a fight. They have at least 8,000, and their technology is generations ahead of ours. We all saw the report. One of their ships took out 12 of ours and didn't even break a sweat. One ship." "Then we'll use our numbers," Thrawn bellowed. "We'll hit them from all sides at once. We will overwhelm them." "You would throw away half our navy in a fight we are guaranteed to lose," High Minister Zelthon cut in, his voice as cold as deep space. The humans are not idiots. They've been watching our tactics. They will know our every move before we even make it. So what's your brilliant plan? Surrender? Just roll over for these primitives? They are not primitives. The voice came from the back of the room. Every single head turned to see Scholar Yella, the oldest member of the Academy of Sciences, slowly getting to her feet. She looked frail, almost like a strong gust of wind could knock her over, but her eyes were burning with an incredible fire. They never were. We were just too arrogant to see it. She began to walk toward the center of the room, her footsteps echoing in the sudden, shocking silence. For the last 2 days, I've gone over every piece of data we have on humanity, their history, their culture, their art, everything. And I've come to a conclusion that chills me to my very soul. Then say it, the Emperor commanded. Yella gave a slight bow. 40 years ago, when we first found Earth, we saw a species at war with itself, broken into hundreds of nations, killing each other over dirt and ideas. We saw their poisoned planet, their endless violence, and their clunky machines. We called them weak because they weren't one people. We called them primitive because they hadn't even conquered their own solar system. We judged them by our own definition of success, and we never, not once, stopped to think that they might have a different one. What other definition is there? Cathron scoffed. Patience, for one, Yella replied, and maybe the wisdom to understand that a species can be dangerous not because of the power it has now, but because of its potential. She touched a control, and the main screen lit up with images from Earth. Old video flickered to life, showing scenes of absolute horror, cities ground into dust, millions dead. Humanity has fought more wars with itself than our empire has fought in our entire 12,000-year history, she said flatly. They have survived genocide, nuclear fire, and the total collapse of their world's ecosystem. They have pushed themselves to the very brink of extinction again and again, and always by their own hand. And every single time, they survived, they rebuilt, they learned, they got stronger. The images on the screen shifted, showing something else. Bright, shining cities rising from the ashes, old enemies shaking hands, former soldiers working shoulder to shoulder to build something better. They were building monuments, not to great warriors, but to peace. They remember their mistakes, Yella said softly. They teach their children about the darkness in their own past, hoping the next generation will make a better choice. When our scouts first saw them 40 years ago, humanity was in the middle of its greatest change. For the first time in their entire history, they were learning how to be one people. United so they could fight us? Cathron growled. Maybe, or maybe just united, Yella said, looking straight at the Emperor. They could have attacked us at any point in the last 10 years. They had the ships, the tech, the element of surprise, but they didn't. They sent one ship, just one, to give us a message. They disabled our patrol fleet without a single casualty. They asked for a peaceful conversation. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. Your Majesty, these are not the actions of a conqueror. These are the actions of a species that understands the true cost of war and has absolutely no desire to pay it ever again. The room was perfectly still. The Emperor sat on his throne like a statue carved from stone, his ancient eyes locked on the images of humanity's violent and yet somehow beautiful history. You think they actually want peace? He finally asked. I believe they want something, Yella answered. What that is, I couldn't possibly guess, but I do believe we should listen to what they have to say before we doom our empire to a war we most likely will not survive. Grand Marshal Cathron shot to his feet. This is insane. The Empire does not negotiate with lesser species. We have never shown weakness. If we agree to this meeting, every race we rule will see it as a sign that we're weak, an open invitation for them to rebel. And if we fight the humans and lose, there won't be an empire left for them to rebel against, Zelthan pointed out calmly. The screaming started all over again. Insults and accusations flew across the chamber. The fear in the room was so thick you could barely breathe. And then a new voice cut through the chaos like a knife. Silence. Everyone froze. A communications officer was standing at the entrance to the chamber, his face as white as a sheet. "What is it?" the Emperor demanded. "The human ship, Your Majesty. It's moved. It's now holding a position right at the edge of our core systems, and it's not alone." He tapped a command on his datapad. The main screen changed. A tactical map of the border appeared. And what they saw on that map made every single heart in that room stop cold. The single human ship was now joined by thousands of others. An entire fleet had appeared out of thin air, creating a silent wall of steel across the border. 8,000 warships sitting in perfect formation, just sitting there. "They jumped," Bethor whispered, his voice full of awe and terror. "They have faster-than-light travel we can't even detect. They moved their entire fleet across the galaxy, and we didn't see a thing." "And yet, they are holding their position," Yella noted. "They are not moving forward. They are not firing their weapons. They are simply waiting." Right on cue, a transmission came in. The screen switched to Ambassador Sarah Chen. She was on the bridge of her flagship, and she had the exact same calm look on her face as before. Behind her, through a massive viewport, the human fleet stretched out like a brand new galaxy. "Your Majesty," she said, giving a small, respectful bow, "I want to apologize for the dramatic entrance. My government felt it was important to show you just how serious we are. We have no intention of using this fleet. We have no desire for war, but we needed you to understand that we are coming to you as equals, not as subjects." She stood up straight, her eyes locking with the Emperor's across the vastness of space. "We are asking again for a meeting. We're not here to make demands or threats. We're here to talk. I'll come to your border station all by myself. No weapons, no guards. I am placing myself completely in your hands as a sign of our good faith." "Why?" the Emperor asked, the word slipping out before he could catch it. "You have every advantage. You could wipe us out. Why are you asking for peace?" Ambassador Chen's expression softened, and a hint of ancient sadness flickered in her eyes. "Because we have destroyed before," she said gently. "We burned our own worlds. We killed billions of our own kind. We fought wars that gave us nothing but pain. We learned the hard way that there is no glory in conquest, no honor in destruction. There are only ashes and graves and the crushing weight of regret." She took a breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was pure steel. "We didn't build this fleet to conquer you. We built it to make certain no one could ever write us off again. We built it so that when we asked for peace, you would listen. We didn't come here to start a war, Your Majesty. We came here to end one before it even had a chance to start." The transmission cut out. The chamber was utterly silent. 8,000 human warships hung in the void, waiting for a reply. Emperor Vorathurto looked at his council, at the absolute terror etched on their faces. He thought about the 12,000 years of his empire, of conquest and might, of the belief that strength was measured by the power to destroy. And then he thought about a species that had learned, through unimaginable pain, that real strength was having the power to choose peace instead. "Send a signal to the border station," he said finally, his voice echoing through the grand hall. "Let the human ambassador know that I will meet with her in person, and tell our fleet to stand down, for now." The council erupted into chaos, but the Emperor simply raised a hand, and they fell silent at once. "I am old," he said softly. "I have ruled for 200 years. I know what war does to a people. If there is even a tiny chance, any chance at all, to avoid that fate, I'm going to take it. Prepare for the meeting." He stood from his throne and walked towards the doors. Behind him, an empire was poised on the brink of a new age, and out in the darkness, humanity waited, with open hands and patient hearts. Have you ever been told you're nothing? That you're just a bunch of primitives, not even worth talking to? Now imagine showing up 40 years later with a fleet that could literally blot out the stars. That's exactly what humanity did, and what happened next will change how you think about power forever. So trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this, For 3,000 years, the Imperial Border Station had been the ultimate symbol of Vorath power, a fortress floating in the silent darkness between galaxies. Its cannons could turn entire fleets to dust, and its shields could survive a siege for months. No one was ever dumb enough to even think about attacking it. But now, that mighty fortress was completely dwarfed by 8,000 human warships hanging in perfect silent formation, their dark hulls just drinking the light from distant suns. They didn't make a move. They didn't send a threat. They just waited, like a hurricane deciding when to finally hit the shore. From the observation deck, Admiral Vathkor watched them, his own fleet of 2,000 Vorath warships gathered behind him. These were the best ships the Empire had, pulled from every corner of their territory. And next to the human fleet, they looked like tiny toy boats in a bathtub. "The Emperor's shuttle is on its way," his aide reported. "He should be at the neutral meeting point in about 20 minutes. Vathkor just gave a small nod, his eyes locked on the view screen. He couldn't look away from the human ships. Their design was brutally simple. No graceful curves, no fancy decorations, no wasted space. Every single line on those ships was made for one thing, and one thing only. They were weapons brought to life, built by a species that understood war in a way the Vorath had thankfully forgotten. "Admiral," his aide said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "you need to see this." He held out a data tablet. Vathkor took it, and an icy chill shot down his spine. "These are scans from their flagship, the one they call the Patient Hand," the aide explained. "Our sensors finally got a peek inside its outer hull. The numbers on the screen, they were just impossible. The ship's power core was putting out more energy than the station's entire network of reactors combined. Its weapons were on another level entirely, and its shields, if this data was even remotely correct, could take a direct hit from the station's main cannon without even a flicker." "One ship," Vathkor whispered, his voice cracking. "Just one of their ships could destroy this entire station by itself." "Yes, Admiral. And they brought 8,000 of them." Vathkor handed the tablet back. His hands were steady as a rock, but inside, a lifetime of absolute belief had just been shattered into a million pieces. His faith in the unbeatable Vorath Empire was crumbling with every impossible number he saw. In the quiet emptiness between the two massive fleets, a pair of small shuttles moved toward each other. One was a stunning Vorath ship, carrying Emperor Vorath himself along with his honor guard. The other was a plain, unarmed human transport. It carried only a single person, Ambassador Sarah Chen. They both docked at a tiny neutral platform that was built just for this meeting. The Emperor stepped out first, surrounded by 20 of his most elite guards, all dressed in the ancient, heavy gold and crimson armor of their ancestors, a symbol of 12,000 years of unbroken rule. Ambassador Chen came out completely alone. She wore a simple gray uniform with no medals, no ribbons, and no weapons. She walked right up to the Emperor, her step steady and calm, without a trace of fear on her face. She stopped at a respectful distance and gave a small bow. "Your Majesty," she said, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me." The Emperor looked her up and down. She was so small compared to a Vorath, almost delicate. Her whole life was probably just a blink of an eye to him, and yet the way she stood there, looking at him, it wasn't like a servant before a king. It was like she was looking at an equal. "You've certainly made quite an impression, Ambassador," the Emperor said, his voice a deep rumble. "My empire hasn't been shaken up like this in 3,000 years. "That was never our goal, Your Majesty," she replied smoothly. "Fear only leads to bad choices. We wanted to have a clear, honest conversation without all that extra noise." "And the 8,000 warships are just to make a point, I suppose?" "The 8,000 warships are here because you wouldn't have listened otherwise," she said, her eyes meeting his. "When your scouts visited Earth 40 years ago, they laughed at us. They called us primitives. They left without a single word of greeting or trade or diplomacy. They decided we were beneath you." The Emperor didn't say a word. He remembered that report. He remembered signing off on it, agreeing with its dismissive conclusion. He hadn't thought about humanity for a single day since then. We understood, Chen continued. We learned that in this galaxy, the weak get ignored, and the strong get a seat at the table. We realized that if we ever wanted you to really hear us, we had to earn that right. So, we built, we learned, we prepared, and now we're here, ready to talk as equals. Grand Marshal Kethron, a hot-headed warrior who had come with the Emperor, stomped forward. Equality? Your people have only been traveling between stars for a few decades. Equality is earned over thousands of years. No, Chen said, her voice staying perfectly calm. We showed our power to make sure our words would be heard. We aren't demanding equality. We are asking for your understanding. She looked back at the Emperor. Your Majesty, I have a request, and it might sound crazy after this display of force. All we ask is that you watch what our fleet does next, and after that, just listen to what we have to say. Watch what? The Emperor demanded. A demonstration, she replied. With your permission, I will order our fleet to fire upon your station. The Emperor's guards instantly raised their weapons. Kethron pulled out his ceremonial sword, but the Emperor held up a hand, stopping them all. You want to attack my station? To prove you can destroy us? No, Your Majesty, she said. To prove that we could, but that we choose not to. Something in her voice, a deep sadness he couldn't quite place, made him hesitate. Proceed, he commanded. Chen tapped a small device on her wrist. All ships, execute pattern 7, single volley. Back on the station's bridge, Admiral Vathkor watched the human fleet light up. 8,000 ships moved as one, their weapon ports glowing with a low hum that seemed to vibrate right through the station's hull and into his very bones. Fire everything! The Admiral roared, a smug grin on his face. Give these humans a taste of real power. A perfect, beautiful wave of destruction shot out, blinding lasers, missiles that warped space, and energy blasts that could turn a moon to dust. The station's shields shimmered, absorbing the first hit, then the second, and then silence. The attack was over. Not a single dent. Not one scratch. Vathkor stared at the screen, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. They missed? He stammered in disbelief. How could every shot miss? His second-in-command turned, his face pale as a ghost. Sir, they didn't miss, he whispered. They hit us with everything. They just tuned their weapons to the exact frequency our shields could block. They knew our defenses down to the last watt and hit us with an arsenal perfectly designed to do nothing. That realization crashed over Admiral Vathkor like a frozen tsunami. This wasn't a failed attack. It was a message. The humans had just proven they could land any punch they wanted, but they could also choose to pull it so it barely even tickled. They had the power to decide, with pinpoint accuracy, who lived and who died, and they had just let every single person on that station live. Standing on the diplomatic platform, Ambassador Chen watched the Emperor's face cycle through confusion, then disbelief, and finally, a slow, dawning horror. The smugness in his eyes evaporated, replaced by something that looked a lot like respect. If we had wanted to destroy you, she said, her voice calm and steady, you'd already be gone. Your station, your entire fleet, this empire. We've run the numbers. We know exactly how this story ends. She stepped a little closer, and her voice dropped, making it personal. We spent 40 years figuring out how to wipe you from existence. Then we spent the next 40 years learning how not to. Because we've been the monster before, Your Majesty. We burned our own world down. We slaughtered our own kind. We know exactly what total victory feels like, and trust me, it tastes like ash in your mouth. She reached out and gently rested a hand on his armored arm. It was a move so shockingly bold, it should have gotten her executed on the spot. We came here with enough power to make you a memory, she said. But we're offering something else, a choice. We can be partners or we can be opponents. We can build something new together, or we can tear each other down. We will honor your decision, no matter what you choose. But you needed to understand that when we offer peace, it isn't because we're weak. We're not begging. We are offering it as equals. The Emperor stood completely still for what felt like an eternity. His royal guards were frozen, unsure of what to do. Grand Marshal Catherine looked like he was about to keel over, but the Emperor was 300 years old. He had learned to recognize the truth when he heard it. "Why?" he finally croaked. "You have this incredible power. Why offer peace at all?" Ambassador Chen gave him a sad, wise smile. "Because we learned the hard way that power isn't the prize, Your Majesty. We learned it standing in the rubble of our own cities, on top of the graves of our own children." She looked him in the eye, and for a second, he saw the crushing weight of human history in her gaze. Every war, every terrible mistake, and every painful step they took to climb out of that hole. "We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want a safe home within it. And there's one more thing. Something is stirring in the deep dark between galaxies, something that's coming for all of us, and we'd much rather face it with friends. We'll get back to that part of the story. For now, all I ask is that you keep an open mind." The Emperor's face was unreadable. The silence in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Finally, he nodded to his personal guard. "Stand down," he ordered, his voice echoing. "Patch me through to the council. Tell them I am on my way back to the capital, and the ambassador will be my honored guest." His gaze locked with Chen's. "It seems you and I have a lot to talk about, Ambassador. For the good of both our species, I hope you're telling me the truth." "So do I, Your Majesty," she replied, her voice firm. "So do I." And together they walked toward the shuttle that would take them to the heart of the Vorith Empire, two worlds connected by the thinnest, most fragile thread, hope. The Imperial throne room wasn't just a room. It was the very heart of the Vorith people. Its walls were carved from the living stone of their homeworld, a planet that now only existed in myths. The ceiling was a perfect replica of its night sky, and the floor was a stunning mosaic, with each tile naming an emperor from their 12,000-year history. Ambassador Sarah Chen strolled down this sacred hall with the intimidating Emperor Barath of Frink right beside her. Trailing behind them, the entire Imperial Council walked in stunned silence, and at the end of the hall sat the throne, a massive chair of power from which the fate of the galaxy had been decided for ages. This whole dramatic entrance had been the Emperor's idea. He wanted his councils to hear what this human had to say directly from her. He needed them to feel the universe shifting under their feet, the same way he did. Chen stopped just before the throne and turned to face the assembled rulers of the most powerful empire in the known galaxy. She stood by herself, having politely turned down an offer for a security team. Here, in the lion's den, her words were her only shield. "You asked me why we came here looking for peace," she started, her voice ringing with clarity. "You wanted to know why a race with our kind of power would choose to cooperate instead of conquer. I'm here to tell you. But to do that, you first have to understand a little bit about a tiny world we call Earth." She tapped a device on her wrist, and a hologram of a beautiful blue and white marble appeared in the air, a fragile gem floating in the blackness. 300 years ago, she said, humanity almost wiped itself out. We created weapons that could crack continents. We raised armies so huge they left scars on the face of our planet. We drew lines on maps and separated ourselves based on our beliefs or the color of our skin, and we convinced ourselves those lines were worth dying for. The hologram shifted, and the beautiful blue world was replaced with images from hell, cities burning to the ground, mushroom clouds blooming over green fields, and bodies left in the streets. We fought wars that killed hundreds of millions of people. We filled our air with poison, we choked our oceans, and we scorched our own lands. We came one button push away from total extinction. And for what? For pride, for fear, for the incredibly arrogant belief that we were right and everyone else was wrong. The council members started fidgeting. They had all read the intelligence reports on how barbaric humans were, But seeing it like this was a completely different story. This wasn't a history lesson. It was a warning. And then, we just stopped, Chen said, her voice dropping to a whisper. There was no big miracle. We just stopped. We stopped because we were standing in the ashes of everything we had ever built, and we could finally feel how heavy it all was. We looked at the faces of the children we had lost and had to ask ourselves if any flag or any piece of land was worth that price. The question hung in the enormous hall. The answer was no. That's the day humanity started to change. It took generations. It cost us dearly and forced us to make compromises that nearly broke us. But the hardest part was forgiveness. We had to forgive our enemies for what they'd done, and just as hard, we had to forgive ourselves for what we'd let ourselves become. We had to build something new from a foundation of pure ash. She looked directly at the Emperor. 40 years ago, when your scouts stumbled upon us, we were still putting the pieces back together. You saw a primitive species, Your Majesty. You were wrong. We weren't primitive. We were a species in recovery. And when we saw the arrogance in your messenger's eyes, the way they dismissed us, we knew we had to face a hard truth. She stood up a little straighter, her voice filled with conviction. We realized the rest of the galaxy was still playing by the same old brutal rules that almost ended us. The strong crush the weak. The powerful take whatever they want. And violence is the only language everyone understands. We looked at your massive empire, and we saw a reflection of our own terrible past, a past we had fought tooth and nail to leave behind. Grand Marshal Catherine, a giant of a man covered in medals, stepped forward, his face dark with fury. That's an insult! The Vorith Empire brought order to 1,000 systems. We stopped the forever wars. We created peace. You're not wrong, Chen agreed easily. You did it with an iron fist, through conquest, by making every other race so scared of you that they wouldn't dream of stepping out of line. That's one way to get peace, sure, but it isn't the only way. And the peace you've created is a house of cards. She turned to face him head on. Your allies don't follow you because they're loyal. They obey you because they're terrified. The second you show any weakness, they will rip you to shreds. The moment a bigger fish comes along, your empire will crumble into 1,000,000 warring factions. You've built your entire civilization on fear, Marshal, and fear is the shakiest foundation in the universe. The Marshal's hand twitched, hovering over his weapon, but the Emperor's voice boomed like an earthquake. Hold, Marshal, let her speak. Ambassador Chen gave a slight nod of gratitude. Your Majesty, I'm not trying to insult your power. I'm trying to warn you that a storm is coming, that all the power in the universe can't frighten away. The holographic image shifted, showing a star chart of the entire galaxy. From the deepest edge of space, a patch of inky blackness was bleeding inwards, like a stain of cosmic rot. Our long-range telescopes first saw this 30 years ago. We've named it the Hollow. It's a wave of absolute nothingness, a void that consumes everything, rolling toward us from the space between galaxies. We have no idea what it is. A freak cosmic event, an ancient weapon of mass destruction, or a form of life we can't even begin to understand. The only thing we know for sure, she continued, as a ripple of unease spread through the massive throne room, is that it's coming our way, and it's scheduled to arrive in roughly 200 years. For an empire that had stood for millennia, 200 years felt like tomorrow. Our scientists ran every possible simulation, Chen said, her voice steady. If the Hollow finds our galaxy divided, with everyone fighting each other, the outcome is brutally simple. We all get extinguished, one system after another. Your incredible empire and its powerful fleets will be wiped from existence. Humanity and all our advanced technology will vanish. If we face this alone, we are all doomed. She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. But if we face it together, with our combined knowledge, our shared industries, our united will to live, then we might actually stand a chance. That's the real reason we built our fleet, Your Majesty. It was never meant to attack you. It was built so that when we came to you offering an alliance, you'd have a reason to listen. The Emperor descended from his enormous throne, each step echoing with immense authority. He stopped directly in front of the human ambassador. She seemed so small, so breakable next to his colossal form, yet she didn't flinch. "You are asking for our trust," he rumbled, his voice like grinding tectonic plates. "You want us to believe that a species we just discovered is being honest, to accept that this unbelievable threat is real, and that an alliance is our only path to survival." "I'm asking you to consider it," Chen replied, her tone perfectly even. "Examine our findings, run the numbers yourselves, and come to your own conclusion. We don't expect an answer today. We've already been preparing for 40 years. We can afford to wait a little longer." "And what if we refuse?" the Emperor challenged. "What if we decide that the Empire can face this threat by itself?" Chen's calm expression didn't waver. "Then we will defend our territory if you attack, and we will prepare for the Hollow alone. We will not force this alliance on you. To do so would make us the very conquerors we're trying so hard not to be." She drew a quiet breath. "But I truly hope you don't refuse. I hope that when you look at our actions, building a fleet only for defense, revealing our strength without firing a shot, and approaching you with an open hand instead of a clenched fist, you'll find a reason to believe we're offering you something this galaxy has never known, Your Majesty. A genuine partnership between equals, a future founded on mutual respect, not on fear." The grand throne room fell into a deep, profound silence. Every courtier, every guard, every official held their breath, their eyes locked on the Emperor. His decision would determine the fate of trillions. He reflected on the 12,000-year legacy of his empire, the countless species crushed under its heel, the worlds taken by force, the power they had hoarded. He thought about the foundation of fear Chen had mentioned, and in his heart he knew it was true. Loyalty built on fear shatters the moment weakness is shown. And then he pictured the Hollow, that creeping, silent darkness coming to swallow everything whole. "I have ruled for 200 years, he said at last. "My decisions have shaped the lives of trillions, but never, not in all my life, have I been presented with a choice this monumental." He scanned the faces of his council. "We stand at a crossroads. We can hold fast to our traditions, to rule by intimidation, by conquest, by isolation. We can pretend that these humans in this Hollow will simply go away. Or we can take an extraordinary leap of faith. We can dare to imagine that these humans are exactly what they appear to be. We can build something the likes of which has never been seen." He turned his gaze back to Chen. "I am choosing the second path. I am choosing this alliance, not because I trust you completely, I do not, but because I saw what you could have done to us with your power, and you chose restraint. That decision, that act of mercy, is something I have not seen in 12,000 years of our history. And that, Ambassador, is a risk I am willing to take." He extended his massive hand, an imitation of the human custom he'd been briefed on. "Ambassador, on behalf of the Vorith Empire, welcome. Let us begin our work." Chen took his hand, her own grip firm and warm. "Your Majesty, I swear to you, this is a choice you will never regret." 1 year later, the galaxy was a different place. Vorith and human warships flew side by side in joint military drills. Their top scientists worked together in shared labs, trading secrets and accelerating discovery. The Empire's subject races, once held in line by terror, were given a new offer. Become partners, not servants. Cooperate, don't just obey. Some systems chose to stay within the new alliance, while others declared their sovereignty. And for the first time in 12,000 years, the Empire let them go in peace. The new joint fleet patrolled the frontier, a shield against pirates, and the first line of defense against the encroaching Hollow. The human captain, Sarah's nephew James Chen, stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the star fields glide by. Next to him, a Vorith officer, Vathkor the Younger, whose own father had been the admiral to first encounter the human fleet, monitored the sensor arrays. He'd been raised on the story of that day, the shock, the fear, and the impossible choice that had followed. "Do you really think we have a shot at stopping it?" Vathkor asked quietly. "The hollow, I mean," he clarified. "Are we really strong enough?" Captain Chen considered the question. "Honestly, I don't know," he admitted. "Nobody does. But here's what I do know. A year ago, our two peoples were about to tear each other apart. Today, we're standing here as allies, getting ready to face the darkness together. No matter what comes next, that fact right there is already a victory." He gestured to the ships around them, Vorath destroyers and human cruisers flying in perfect sync, their crews operating as one team. "My aunt always said that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't our tech or our warships. It was our capacity for change, our ability to look our own worst instincts in the eye and choose a better path. Maybe that's the secret that will get us through this. It's not the weapons we built that will save us, but the choice we made to use them to protect instead of to conquer." Vathkor nodded slowly, processing the thought. "Your species is strange, human. You have the power to rule, but you ask for cooperation. You have the strength to destroy, but you show compassion. I confess, I still don't fully understand it." Captain Chen smiled faintly. "Sometimes we don't either. But we try. And in the end, that's the best any of us can do." The fleet pushed onward, deeper into the void, its engines painting streaks of light against the unending black. Behind them, 1,000 worlds waited, caught between hope and fear. Ahead lay the great unknown. But this time, they weren't facing it alone. Human and Vorath, together. Old enemies had become trusted friends. Two mighty civilizations, both marked by their own histories of violence, were now reaching for a future that was impossible for either of them to build by themselves. And out in the silent darkness between galaxies, the Hollow continued its relentless journey. It did not know fear. It had no capacity for mercy. Its one and only purpose was to devour everything in its path. But for the first time in eons, something new was waiting for it, something that had learned how to turn weapons into shields and enemies into allies, something that had chosen, against all odds and every lesson of history, to take a chance on peace. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same again.